This next video will cover problem 17.4 from Gapenski's Healthcare Finance, 6th edition. Okay, so 17.4 asks us to do a DuPont analysis on an organization called Best Care, and we're given their financial statements. So DuPont analysis is just really kind of four ratios. It is return on equity, total margin, times total asset turnover, times the equity multiplier. Equity multiplier. I'm starting to write out what it is. Right. And so ROE, return on equity, decomposes into these three other ratios, right? So ROE is net income divided by equity. Total margin is net income divided by total revenue. Total asset turnover is total revenue divided by total assets. And equity multiplier is total assets divided by equity. So if you do some basic, algebraic cancellations, you'd say, okay, well, if total revenue is in the denominator here and total revenue is in the numerator here, I could cancel those out. And then if total assets is in the denominator here and total assets is in the numerator here, I could cancel that out, and it would leave net income divided by equity, which is ROE, right? Now, you say, well, why am I doing this? I just go straight to net income. Well, because these four ratios each tell us something a little different. This tells us how the organization is doing in terms of getting a return for its investors, or in the case of a not-for-profit entity, how they're doing in terms of getting a return for their community. Net income, total margin tells us how well they're doing in terms of how efficient they are at converting sales, or sales of services, right? So patient care services into net income. So for every dollar of revenue they earn, how much is left over? How many cents are left over in terms of income? Total revenue divided by total assets tells us how effective they are at using their assets to generate revenue. And then the total equity multiplier, it basically tells us their capitalization ratio. Right? So this is kind of like the flip side of the debt ratio, right? You could just as easily, you invert this and subtract one from it, and you get the debt ratio. So this is just another way of another way of measuring the capitalization ratio. Okay, so let's actually look at this. So in let's see, I want this. Oh, this is Best Care, right? So Best Care's net income, according to the statement of operations, is 1218, and then we go to their balance sheet to find their equity, and their equity is 2118, right? Their net income. So then again, we know their net income. We need their total revenue, and their total revenue. We go back to the income statement, and their total revenue is 28,613 because they don't have any non-operating revenue, so we can just work with their operating revenue, 28,613. So then we know their total revenue is 28,613, right? Because it's the same. And then we need their total assets. So we go to the balance sheet. Their total assets are 9869. And then 9869 again, because that's total assets. And then we need their equity is 2118, which we already know, right? So now we can get, we can get the percentages here. So ROE is 57.5. Wow. Percent. Net income is 4.2%, 4.26%. Total revenue is, total asset turnover is 2.9 times. And total equity multiplier is 4.65. Okay. So if we take the industry averages, return on equity, industry average is 25.5%. The total margin is 3.8%. The total asset turnover is 2.1. The equity multiplier is 3.2. Okay. So going from right to left, let's do a comparison. So this is industry average. This is best care, right? So what's better? Well, again, capitalization isn't really better or worse. It just tells you kind of how risky the organization is. So having a higher equity multiplier means that you're carrying more debt relative to your equity, because you're making, in order to get a higher equity multiplier, your equity has to be smaller relative to your total assets. So that means that Best Care has a relatively small amount of equity with respect to its total assets compared to the industry average. So they're a little more risky, right? They're a little more leveraged. They're using more debt to finance their capital structure than the industry average. However, they do a better job. They earn more revenue per dollar of assets than the industry average, right? They're earning $2.9 per dollar of assets versus $2.1 per asset. So that means they do a good job selling their services with respect to their assets. Or it could mean that they have old assets and they carry them at a low, a low dollar, like we talked about in 17.3. Total margin. So how are they doing in terms of converting revenues from their patient services into actual net income? Well, they have a higher net income with respect to they're keeping more of their earnings in the form of net income versus total revenue. And so the fact that they're doing better in their total margin than their total asset turnover, combined with the fact that they use more debt, is going to drive their ROE up, right? And so if they were less leveraged, they would probably wind up with a lower ROE, but they still have a higher total margin and a higher total asset turnover. So leverage is a part of their story, but a part of the story is also they're just doing a good job. All right, so that is part A. Part B is okay. So part B asks us to look at a list of ratios and compare Best Care to them. So return on assets, you got to get your net income divided by your total assets. So that's 1218 divided by 9869, or 12.3% for Best Care versus the industry average of 8%. So that's good. They have a higher return on assets, which means they get a better return with respect to the amount of assets that they control than the industry average. current ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. The industry average is 1.3. Best Care has 39.45 in current assets, 34.56 in current liabilities. So that is a ratio of 1.1. So they are lower than the industry average. So that's not good. Though it's close, but it's not good, right? You want to be above the industry average if you can in current with respect to current ratio. Higher is better. Days cash on hand. This talks to how many days of expenses would they be able to pay with the amount of cash they have on hand, right? That is cash plus short-term investments divided by expenses minus depreciation, minus the provision for bad debts, because is not depreciation and provision for bad debts isn't actually an expense, right? Divided by 365. So you're trying to get a day, like a cost per day or expenses per day. So that's going to be total cash and short-term investments is 2737, and then their expenses are 27,395. Depreciation is 367, and provision for bad debts is 19. Divide all that by 365 and get 74 per day. So 2737 divided by 74 gives us 37 days on hand. So again, they're a little lower than industry average. More is better in terms of days cash on hand, with kind of within a range, right? You want to be close to the industry average there, because you don't want too much cash. Too much cash on hand means you're not managing your cash well, right? You really just want to have enough. You don't want to have too much, because too much cash means that you're not investing it someplace else, or you're not paying it back to your investors if you're a for-profit. Okay. Average collection premium here, average collection period is net premiums receivable. So basically accounts receivable divided by premiums earned, right? Premiums earned divided by 365. So we're going to take our accounts receivable. That's 7,751. Premiums receivable is 821 divided by they have 26,682 in earnings, and dividing that by 365, we get wrong button. We get 26,862 divided by 365 gives us 73. Invert it times 821 gives us 11.2 days. So average collection period, the industry average is 7 days. They have 11.2 days. That's bad because they're taking longer to collect their cash on their sales, right? And so they're basically financing the people who are buying from them. Okay, debt ratio. Debt ratio is just total liabilities divided by total assets, right? And so that is 7,751 divided by 9,869, or 78.5%. And as we discussed in the prior problem, part A, they have a higher equity multiplier, which means they also have a higher debt ratio, right? And so this just shows that. So they're a little riskier because they carry more debt. They have more debt financing than average. And then their debt to equity ratio is also going to be higher than the industry average because, again, they're carrying more debt. So debt to equity ratio is total liabilities divided by total equity, right? And so here we have 7,751 divided by 2118. So that comes up to 3.7, right? And so again, it's just a different way of expressing the debt ratio, really. So this says they have more debt, uh, uh, or they finance themselves with more debt than the industry average. Times interest earned is your EBIT divided by your interest expense. So your EBIT is going to be your net income, adding back your interest expense and then divided by your interest expense. So their net income is 1218. Their interest expense is 385. So we add 385 and 1218. That gives us 1603. And then we divide by the interest expense, 385. That gives us a times interest earned of 4.2. So even though they carry more debt and therefore have more interest expense, they actually have strong enough earnings that they're actually stronger. They're more able to pay back their interest than the industry average. And finally, the fixed asset turnover is total revenue divided by net fixed assets, right? So that's net property, plant, and equipment. Their total revenue is 28,613. Their net fixed assets is 5924. So they have 4.8 fixed asset turnover. The industry average is 5.2. So they're a little low in terms of turning over on their assets. If we did an average plant, average age of plant, maybe they have a younger plant. It's harder to say without more information in this case. All right. So that is 17.4.